Veni Domine, Maranatha, Sito veni Maranatha.
Jared Ortiz joined Hope College in 2012. He teaches Catholic theology at the Department of Religion and is founder and executive director of the Saint Benedict Institute, the Catholic Spiritual and Intellectual Center that serves Hope College. Dr. Ortiz teaches courses on the mysteries of Christianity, church history, Catholicism, the theology of the human person, and early Christianity. He co-authored a commentary on the Nicene Creed and is currently working on publishing commentary on the Rule of Saint Benedict. Dr. Ortiz specializes in early Christian theology, especially St. Augustine. He's given 3 previous lectures here at Authenticum: the Perennial Wisdom on the Rule of Saint Benedict, Intellectual Disability and the Sabbath Structure of the Human Person, and a lecture on grace and divinization, all of which you can find for free on Spotify. He has scholarly interests in liturgy, patristic theology, and disability. The title of his lecture tonight is The Monk and the Machine, Preserving Our Humanity in the Digital Age. Let's give a nice resounding welcome back to Dr. Jared Ortiz. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for that generous introduction. And I know you said you struck out a number of times, and I'm sorry, I think you struck out again. I'm here. Yes, especially if you're expecting Father Gallagher, who is a great spiritual director, teach you to discern the spirits. And so, yes, you will now realize that you've gotten the short end of the stick. But thank you all for coming out. I'm grateful. Going forward, there will be only 2 ways of living: the artificial way and the ascetic way. And the difference between these 2 ways is great. Either we will be devoured by our own devices and become machines, or we will practice asceticism and imitate the monks so we can carve out a small refuge of humanity. These 2 ways of being arise from 2 competing ways of thinking about reality: technology and theology, artificial intelligence and what we might call ascetic intelligence. Technology or theology, artificial life or ascetic life, these are the options before us. And this talk will explore these competing approaches to reality: the artificial intelligence flowing out of Silicon Valley and the wisdom flowing from the monastic tradition, especially the wisdom of Saint Benedict. Now let me begin with just a brief linguistic note. When I say technology, most of us think of the machines and devices we enjoy and benefit from today: cell phones, computers, MRI machines, drones, the Roomba, this microphone. When we think of technology as these things, we tend to think that technology is a neutral tool that we use. But technology is not a neutral tool. Technology is a worldview. It's an approach to reality. And our modern technology is not something we use, but something that increasingly uses us. Technology is a way of viewing reality through the lens of artifice, through what we have made. Contrast this to another logy, theology, which is a way of accounting for reality from the point of view of God, or seeing the world as God made it. Technology and theology both make claims about the nature of God and the world, about human beings and their destiny. And I'll try to spell out these 2 approaches briefly here and then expand it in the rest of the paper. In the technological view, the goal is to create God, merge with God, and therefore become God. Through technological prowess, we can conquer nature and live a life without limits. By conquer nature, I include conquering our own human nature. The goal is to transcend our biological limitations, or perhaps biology itself, in order to live a life with augmented mental and physical powers, and eventually a life without suffering or death. The technological view envisions us living forever, either by keeping our bodies alive through technological advances, or by preserving our consciousness in a machine. Ultimately, the goal is to replace nature with technology, to replace what God has made with what we have made. In the theological view, the goal is to worship God, to have union with God, and to be deified, that is, permeated with God's presence while always remaining his creature. Through God's grace, we can conquer not our human nature, but the vices that harm our nature. We accept our human limitations. We embrace nature and human nature as gifts given by God. Since we are fallen, we must also embrace the more severe limitations of asceticism, which heal our wounded nature and restore our humanity. We also embrace death, both ascetic dying to self, as well as human mortality. Only by accepting the limits of both forms of death will we live forever, receiving eternal life as a gift from the one true God. So in this talk, I'll first reflect on the aspirations of the founders of modern science and how these find fulfillment in the digital age. Then I'll reflect on Saint Benedict. Specifically, I'll focus on some ascetic practices learned from Saint Benedict that can preserve us from the idolatry and anti-human agenda of our tech gurus. So to understand the achievement and aspirations of contemporary AI technology, it's important to reread the 17th century founding fathers of modern science, Francis Bacon and René Descartes. This is on the second page of your handout. From the beginning, the question for science was how to approach reality. In his New Organon, or True Directions Concerning the Interpretation of Nature, Bacon proposes a new way of thinking about nature, which interprets it as something to be conquered. It is conquered by using our minds mechanically and harassing, vexing nature until she reveals her secrets. The purpose is to subject nature to the empire of man in order to undo the effects of the fall, particularly sickness, suffering, and death. Bacon founds his new science on evidence and demonstration. For him, this means experimenting on nature, which we should not observe free and unconstrained, but, he says, confined and harassed. We see here Bacon's approach to understanding. We learn more about things not by seeing them alive, whole, and in action, but by examining them dead, dissected, and artificially constrained. Bacon continues, and it's on your sheet, with an important exhortation. He says, pay no attention to men's disgust or what they find attractive, since nature reveals herself more through the harassment of art than in her own proper freedom. The practice of disregarding our natural disgust has been key to the success of the modern scientific project, which has required dissecting animals while they are still alive and digging up recently buried human bodies. This sort of thing is conceivable because the new science, Michael Hanby notes, regards nature as a kind of machine, so you feel less bad chopping it up while it's running. And therefore, the knowledge of nature is a kind of engineering. Note Bacon's comment about perfecting human thinking by making it operate like a machine. It's very prescient. Perhaps it is his mechanical view of the mind that leads him to say his most famous line, knowledge is power, which they put up in elementary schools, and it's totally demonic. Knowledge is power, and its corollary, truth and usefulness are the very same. Knowledge for Bacon is not about seeing the world as God made it. Truth is not about conforming our minds to reality. Rather, knowledge is discovery of hidden powers, and truth is success. Success in using these powers to benefit ourselves. Again, it's not just nature out there that is a machine to be tinkered with, but we ourselves, who are also understood as machines. Those of you who grew up with Schoolhouse Rocks, you know this. I'm a machine, you're a machine. For Bacon, the task and purpose of human power is to extract powers from things and then to turn some things into other things for our own benefit. The only limits, he says, the only limits on this new science is what is possible. Now, Bacon may sound like a magician or a mad scientist, but his intentions are largely benevolent. He desires that all these things benefit human beings. He wants to repair the effects of the fall. He says that explicitly. Descartes, too, while differing in method, shared these similar goals to Bacon. He says, and it's on your sheet, through a renewed science, we might render ourselves the lords and possessors of nature. And with admirable clarity, he prophesies the consequences of this lordship, the preservation of health, which is without a doubt, of all the blessings of this life, the first and fundamental one, and that we could free ourselves from an infinity of maladies of body as well as of mind, and perhaps also even from the debility of age. The ultimate goal of their new science is to acquire power over nature so we can conquer death. Now, again, in many ways, their goals are salutary, and the fact that half of us are in debt already is evidence that we have benefited from the fruits of Bacon and Descartes' vision. Yet there is a shadow side to these aspirations, one which finds paradigmatic expression in the Garden of Eden story. Recall that God plants a garden with two important trees, the tree of life in the midst of the garden, the heart of their Edenic home, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God gives them permission to eat of every tree, including the tree of life, but prohibits only one, right? Eating from the tree of knowledge. But by the time the woman is talking to the serpent, something's gone wrong. The woman conflates the two trees. She says they're forbidden from eating the one in the midst, right? The tree of life. The serpent exploits this confusion, assuring our first parents that they will not die when they eat the forbidden fruit, but that they'll become like God, knowing good and evil. Very subtly, the serpent teaches humanity that God is wrong, knowledge is power, and transgression is life. This now becomes the pattern for human beings. God freely offers eternal life, but we try to do it on our own. Instead of letting God make us immortal through grace, we reach out and try to make ourselves immortal through another mechanism. In the garden, we eat and hope to be transformed into God. Today, our science offers the same promise. We can eat from the tree of scientific knowledge to try to gain immortal life. Not through God's grace will we achieve immortality, but through technology. 400 years after Bacon and Descartes, we have the dramatic rise of AI, where we see the wildest dreams of those founders coming true. The makers of AI are very clear that they want to create God, have humans merge with this created God, and thereby become God ourselves. The goal is a life without any limits, made possible through technological innovation. And lest I be accused of exaggerating, I put a lot of quotes on your sheet. Hugo de Garis, a physicist and artificial brain researcher, says, there's more computing capacity in that nanotech grain of sand than in our human brain by a factor of billions. So these machines, if we decide to build them, we're building gods. Ray Kurzweil, Google engineer and tech prophet, says, so does God exist? Well, I would say, not yet. Now, we might question whether they have an adequate understanding of God, but their intentions are clear. Build a God-like machine that surpasses collective humanity in every metric, which will then guide us all to a post-human or transhuman future. Once we build this machine God, the goal is to merge with it. Elon Musk thinks we are already there. He says, all of us already are cyborgs. So you have a machine extension of yourself in the form of your phone and your computer and all your applications. You are already superhuman. Kurzweil says, as we merge with AI in this way, we will become a hybrid species. We'll still be human, but will be enhanced by AI. Our machines are going to continue to shrink in size and gain power to the point where they are invisible and inside our bodies. As we merge with technology, we will no longer be limited by our biology. We will be free, he says, to live life without limits. Kurzweil's vision of a life without limits is not a vision for human beings, but a vision for some kind of God. The goal, as in the garden, is to reject the limits of being a creature and to be gods unto ourselves. Peter Diamandis, who's an engineer and a physician, says that we will achieve godlike attributes through AI. We humans are going to start linking with each other and become this meta-intelligence, and we will eventually become an interconnection of the entire human race, and we will be godlike. He even says that we will acquire powers of omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence. I mean, in some ways, we're already there, right? What's going on in Africa right now? Well, we can look it up, right? We can transverse that space in a matter of seconds. Any of you in your pocket could tell me what's going on the other side of the world. Creating God is a collective project, but we all have something to contribute, and the result is exponentially greater than the individual. Yet each of us will partake of the superintelligence, and we will have omnipowers. We are the God we have been waiting for. So for some, these divine powers extend to creating other persons and to resurrecting the dead. Ben Goertzel, computer scientist and AI researcher, says by the 2030s, which is not very far away, AIs will be millions of times more intelligent than humans, so they could be assigned to create a person. Ray Kurzweil, long ago, stated his desire to resurrect his dead father, reminding us of Bacon's exhortation to pay no attention to man's disgust, and aspiring to the body snatchers of old. Kurzweil says, "We can find some of my father's DNA around his gravesite. That's a lot of information right there. The AI will send down some nanobots and get some bone or teeth and extract some DNA and put it all together. Then they'll get some information from my brain and anyone else who still remembers him." As of 2025, Kurzweil has made an AI replicant of his father, though the DNA extraction and recreation, one hopes, is still far off. For now, these omnipowers extend only to the earth and clearly are still far inferior to any powers theists generally attribute to God. Still, if the AI prophets prophesy truly, we will extend our powers into the universe. Once again, in an eerie echo of Bacon, Kurzweil speaks of extending the human empire by imposing a cyborg face on all of nature and the galaxy. And ultimately, he says, information will be everything. In the future, everything will become intelligent. Nanobots will infuse all the matter around us with information. Rocks, trees, everything will become these intelligent computers. So at that point, we're going to expand out into the rest of the universe. Swarms of those will go out in the universe and basically find other matter and energy that we can harness to expand the overall intelligence of our human-machine civilization. The end is not God being all in all, as Paul movingly describes in 1 Corinthians 15, but information permeating everything. Artificial humanity will infect the whole universe. Now, the modern idolatry of AI is just a digitally enhanced version of ancient idolatry. It's the same rejection of creaturely limits, grabbing the fruit from the tree of knowledge and trying to become God without God. It's the same effort to build a tall tower so we can ascend to the heavens by our own ingenuity. It is the same impatience that led the Israelites to share their little bits of gold to throw into the fire until a golden calf emerged to guide them. The builders of AI are clear that they are trying to build an omnipowered machine deity, which presumably would benevolently rule over us. Though, when you poll them, they think there's probably a 10 to 25% chance that the AIs will just kill us. But 75% chance they'll benevolently rule is pretty good. So, okay, now you might be asking, all right, what does this have to do with us? Okay, so these Silicon Valley gurus, they're a bit nuts, fine. But having a smartphone, using AI at work, this seems like a far cry from such idolatry. So let's think about our participation in this modern idolatry in two ways. So first, simply, our use of these technologies funds their aspirations. They could not do it without our support. Second, and this one is more difficult to see, the very medium of digital technology, the very medium, regardless of what you do with it, the very medium of digital technology and the way that we engage it is a tacit participation in the same idolatry. So let me try to unpack that provocative claim. What is the first thing you do in the morning? And what is the last thing you do at night? For the majority of us, the answer is check my phone. The average person spends 7 hours a day beholding a screen. What does this mean? In his profound book, A Web of Our Own Making, philosopher Anton Barbecue argues, I got this on your sheet, all dominant media have attained sacred status. If not by being directly worshipped, then by capturing the terms in which worship is understood, the terms in which it is possible to express our longing for what is ultimate. We have given over our attention, our mind, our heart. We consult these devices for advice, for knowledge. We seek comfort from them, and we find meaning in them. They permeate our day, and we constantly refer back to them. We miss them when they are gone, and they fill us when they are present. This is perhaps how a pious monk might speak about God. The subtitle of Barbecue's book is The Nature of Digital Formation. Every technology shapes us, whether we know it or not, and digital technology shapes us in more profound ways than other technologies. Barbecue argues that digital technology is a new stage in technology, where we understand that what is natural, that's given as part of our human nature, is fused with what is artificial, what is man-made. The appearance of digital technology marks the moment, he says, at which our tools or media are identified with our own conception of what is true, who we are, and what is good. Right? I tease my students stroking their phones as they're precious, right? It becomes part of their being, right? They're identified with their precious. They speak in the plural. When Elon Musk said that we are already cyborgs, he's not talking about an aspiration, though it certainly benefits him. He is observing a fact, that we, perhaps unwittingly, see our phones as an extension of our person. Barbecue explains why this happens. Because the digital transformation is not an event occurring at a distance, but a change happening through and within each one of us. We are the subjects and objects of this revolution. We undertake it and we undergo it. We find ourselves doing it as it happens. The more we use our digital technology, the more we merge with it, just as Silicon Valley intends. This may not be our intentional desire, but it is the effect of our regular use. We love our devices and we pour ourselves into them because they're so perfectly responsive to our will. They reflect us back to ourselves in the way we seemingly want. This is the magic of their addictive quality. But it is also the way that we participate in the technological idolatry. The goal of all modern technology, Barbecue says, is to make a machine like us and to make ourselves like a machine, thereby becoming makers of our lives. To be able to make ourselves is to become perfect in the sense of being self-caused and self-willed, that is, to be ourselves as gods. I didn't say this in my other talk, but this is a friendly audience. There's an intimate connection actually between the transgender movement and the transhuman movement. Biology is the enemy, right? You overcome that. You find the real you. You have a pixelated body online. You can make it do what you want. You can make your body conform to it in a post-human future. It's a war on nature, a war on biology. But we're self-made, we're self-caused, we're self-willed. We determine the meaning of our existence. So this should not be surprising. The psalmist warned us long ago about the effects of idolatry. He says, "Their idols are silver and gold, the work of men's hands. They have mouths, but they do not speak, eyes, but they do not see. They have ears, but they do not hear. Those who make them are like them. So are all who trust in them." We become what we worship. We are transformed into what we love. If we love the machine, we will become machines. As Barbecue astutely notes, we love our own creations and then lose sight of them as ours. When you make what you want what you make. This is the picture of idolatry. The danger is real on many levels. We are actively undermining our own humanity. The more we extend ourselves into our machines, the more we diminish our human capacities. A shortcut to any particular task might seem harmless in itself, but what is chosen now for convenience will eventually become necessity over time. When we shift from human doing to machine outputs, we lose something essentially human. At least in the way most of us use it. AI is not a tool that extends our abilities, but a technology that replaces them. A hammer extends the power of my hand to build. A knife extends my power to cut. They are tools that I wield. But artificial intelligence does not extend the power of my mind to think. It replaces it. As the machine increases, we decrease. We humans are building a machine, or a god, that devours our humanity. The more we feed it, the more it consumes us, and the more we are changed into it. We made this idol, and now we are becoming like it. So in light of this rather gloomy prognosis, what is to be done? How should we respond to the situation? Now, the question most people are asking, and I gave this talk at Hope, so I didn't say this out loud, but the question they're asking at Hope College is about responsible use, right? How do we responsibly use AI? But if we are dealing with a technology that consumes our humanity, then asking about responsible use is probably not the right question. It's like asking, how do we responsibly use crystal meth? Unless we are content to offer our humanity to a false god, there really isn't much responsible use. So what is to be done? While digital technology is new, its attendant idolatry and dehumanization are not. AI is a spiritual problem, and so requires a spiritual solution. We must seek and listen to the wisdom of those who have successfully resisted such temptations. Saint Benedict is one such wise voice. In the early 6th century, Benedict abandoned a decadent and dying empire to live in a cave for 3 years. Actually dropped out of college to go live in a cave for 3 years, before God called him to found the monastic communities that would transform the world. To formulate the beginnings of a spiritual response, we'll meditate on Benedict's only written work, his rule for monks. Benedict begins his rule saying, "Listen, listen, O my son, to the precepts of the Master, and incline the ear of your heart. Willingly receive and faithfully fulfill the admonition of your loving Father, that you may return by the labor of obedience to him from whom you had departed through the laziness of disobedience. We fell by listening to the devil. The path back begins by listening again. Now to a teacher and father like Saint Benedict, who loves us and knows the path back to God. In the garden, we fell by disobedience. We continue to fall through what Benedict calls the laziness of disobedience, a particularly apt phrase for our AI moment. Our disobedience to God is not always a fist-shaking transgression. Often it is merely a drifting away, a culpable forgetfulness, a letting go of the good. It is certainly pride to claim that we are creating God in a lab. But for most of us, our idolatry and separation from God will occur through the inattention of scrolling, clicking, and swiping. The choice before us is either to passively allow our humanity to be unmade through the laziness of disobedience, or to actively recover it through the labor of obedience. For Benedict, listening must lead to interior transformation and be embodied in a changed way of life. In chapter 4 of the rule, Benedict lays out 72 instruments for good works to aid in this embodied work of transformation. Now, while not all of the instruments of good works deal with asceticism, I will focus just on 3 ascetical precepts from Benedict's list: to love fasting, to love chastity, and to daily keep death before one's eyes. I've chosen these 3 because they deal with the self-discipline required to live rightly with regard to eating, sex, and avoiding death, the most fundamental human desires related to self-preservation. These are, not incidentally, the same drives motivating the modern scientific project. Okay, 3 ascetic precepts, but why do we need asceticism at all? Why do we need extra spiritual training and self-discipline? Isn't this just the special activity of monks? Probably preaching to the choir here. But Louis Bouillet offers a striking explanation for why it's necessary for everyone to practice asceticism. The reason lies in sin. Sin has vitiated our relations with things by vitiating the natural attitude of our soul, our will. Turned in upon ourselves by the deepest tendency of our being, instead of tending directly to God, we relate everything to ourselves instead of referring all to Him. Sounds like our iPhone. That is why, in order to find Him again, it's essential to strip ourselves of ourselves. And it is to strip ourselves of ourselves that it is necessary to detach ourselves from everything created. Before the fall, all of creation pointed us to God. After the fall, we refer everything to ourselves. We want to be God. We want to be the center of the universe. The modern scientific project and its AI manifestation is just one powerful expression of this primordial wound in the soul that spurs us to make ourselves the center of the universe. If sin is the root of the problem, then asceticism is the response the Christian tradition offers to remedy it. Now, when Benedict lists these instruments of fasting and chastity, he says not only that we must practice them, we can probably get on board with that, but he says we must love them. For Benedict, love, desire, is the key to our transformation. But here's the problem. Fasting and chastity are not particularly lovable. Why should we love them? Let me give you a few reasons. First, we should love fasting and chastity because Christ fasted and Christ was chaste. We can love imitating Christ. Second, we should love what these disciplines do for us. Fasting teaches us self-control. Chastity brings about integration. We can love being a better human. Third, the means that God has provided for our transformation should not merely be endured, but eagerly embraced, pursued, and ultimately loved. Fourth, Benedict knows that our desires need to be reordered. Desire draws us out of ourselves, and desire can either draw us into the world or into God. We should love fasting and chastity because these heal our desires, so we can love the right things in the right way, thereby being drawn into God. Lastly, loving these reminds us that it is not our efforts that heal us, but only God's grace. Only love, the presence of God in us, can make us love these disciplines, which can make us whole again. To understand how fasting and chastity can help us resist being swallowed by AI, let us return again to the garden. The first sin was disobedience that involved trying to be God through eating. The first consequence of disobedience was sexual disorder. Their eyes were open and they saw they were naked. Eating transforms them, but not in the way they hoped. Disobedience to God results in the disobedience of our bodies, and therefore seeing the world in a new way. If the first sin is disobedience with regard to eating, whose consequence is sexual disorder and a new distorted approach to reality, then the path of obedience back to God will involve healing our eating and sex, will involve healing through fasting and chastity. Now, eating is a surprisingly ambiguous act. It means taking something from the world, destroying it, and transforming it into ourselves. Omnivorous man, the man who devours omni, the one who eats any and everything, is particularly ambiguous. Disordered eating is called gluttony. Often motivated by curiosity or by fear, gluttony is a compulsion to fill ourselves with the world. Now, our desire for sex, when rightly ordered, is a desire for self-giving union, for life-giving union. But when it is not rightly ordered, it's a desire for acquisition, conquering, pleasure. With gluttony and lust, the world is seen as something to be appropriated, conquered, assimilated, even destroyed, and transformed into oneself. AI is a kind of apotheosis of this disposition toward the world. AI is the great consumer, the great transformer, the great assimilator. AI is the great illusion maker and desire fulfiller. How can fasting and chastity help us here? Let's start with fasting. Fasting is a bodily protest against AI. Fasting brings us to a state of non-assimilation. We become less dependent on the world. We take less of it in. We enter into a Sabbath-like state where we allow God's world to be. Now, fasting has many meanings in Scripture which are relevant here. It's often connected with mourning a loss or penitence for wrongdoing, either personal or national. It's a sign of humility and a deliberate weakening of oneself before God. Fasting often accompanies supplication, and along with almsgiving is considered the wings of prayer. Fasting is also preparation for seeing God. Moses and Elijah both fasted for 40 days before they saw God on their respective mountains. Not coincidentally, Moses and Elijah were privileged to see God's glory revealed in Christ's transfiguration. Christ also fasted 40 days in preparation to confront the devil. For as he himself tells us, some demons are only cast out by prayer and fasting. In the early church, two key meanings of fasting get taken up, particularly healing our desires and preparing for the bridegroom. Now, the first is based on certain passages from Paul. I discipline my body and keep it under control. And then he says, and those who belong to Christ have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. Right? Healing our desires. The second meaning, the bridegroom, preparing for the bridegroom, comes from Christ's own response to the Pharisees about why his disciples do not fast. Can the wedding guests mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast. Now, the two meanings are related. Fasting is meant to heal the soul as preparation for meeting the bridegroom. So while we mourn Christ's absence now, our waiting is also infused with hope and joyful longing for the marriage feast. Now, all of these meanings suggest that fasting offers an important antidote to AI. The temptations of AI are and will be legion. I use that term deliberately. It will masterfully entice our desires and even create new ones. It will tempt us to offload more and more of our humanity for the sake of convenience. Fasting, though, will help to reorder our desires and discipline our bodies. Fasting gets us in the habit of sacrificing legitimate goods, like food, so we will be better prepared to resist whatever AI might offer. We might also fast in reparation for our online sins and those of our nation. The physical humbling of ourselves is a salutary response to the hubris of AI enhancement. When the AI boom started a few years ago, Elon Musk said, we are summoning the demon. And it is certainly a demon who teaches us that a machine can be God and tries to unmake our humanity. Fasting, along with prayer, will be necessary to exorcise this demon. Lastly, if fasting prepares us to see God and is related to our eschatological transfiguration, then it can help us recognize and resist the false idols and the false transformations promised by AI. Now, as we noted earlier, food and sex are intimately related, and so too fasting and chastity. The monk, and now bishop, and hopefully one day Pope, Eric Varden, says, "The pursuit of chastity is inseparable from fasting, which we should understand not merely as disciplined eating, but as a psychobiological, a soul biology, a soul body, a psychobiological, therapeutic healing practice of liberation from self-centeredness. Fasting and chastity liberate us from self-centeredness. Instead of consuming and taking in to ourselves as the center, right? We let the world be and see it for what it is. Fasting and chastity together heal us from our distorted attachment and engagement with the world. But the two are related for eschatological end times reasons as well. Just as fasting is preparation for meeting God, so too is chastity. Jesus tells us, "Blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God." Chastity is the virtue that reintegrates our fractured heart so we can see things truly. We can see God in other people, and we can see things as God made them. Now, we noted that the first consequence of the fall was a change in our way of seeing. Our eyes were opened, and we immediately became aware of an interior disintegration. Our body no longer responded properly to our soul. We're at war within ourselves, battered by unruly desires, and so we seek to conquer the world because we cannot conquer ourselves. The sinful disposition associated with this approach to the world is called concupiscence. St. John names 3 forms of it. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and the pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. Concupiscence is a way of viewing the world as a means to satisfy our own pleasure, curiosity, and ambition. It's a desire to grasp, to immerse ourselves in things and to cling to them for their own sake. AI will offer an almost unlimited scope for these desires, tailored perfectly to each individual. The more we pursue these desires, the more disintegrated we will become. The more AI feeds these desires, the more we lose sight of the horizon of human life. We need then, in addition to fasting and chastity, memento mori. We need to remember our mortality, the third ascetic precept. Benedict says that a monk ought to daily keep death before his eyes. In light of technological advances, this classic memento mori seems more and more backward. When one interview observed, "You seem to be at war with biology," Ray Kurzweil responded, "Biology has a lot of limitations. A lot of analysts feel there's nothing inevitable about dying, and we're coming up with ways to stop it. Basically, we can get rid of death through aging. It's better not to die." So that's the challenge. Isn't accepting death just an outmoded way of thinking, like accepting the inevitability of leprosy or smallpox? So we find ourselves today in the odd position of making the case for death. Can we do it? Now, there are rational and practical arguments, the best of which come from a series of brilliant articles by Leon Kass. There, he thoughtfully explores whether more years would add any substantial happiness to our lives, or whether we would feel the weight of our actions, or aspire to nobility without a horizon to life. But the real question, Kass says, is why do we desire immortality? Is it really a desire for more of this life? Is it a desire to just continue? Cass argues, this is on your sheet, that man longs not so much for deathlessness as for wholeness, wisdom, goodness, godliness, longings that cannot be satisfied fully in our embodied earthly life. The taste for human immortality, for the imperishable and the eternal, is not a taste that the biomedical conquest of death could satisfy. We would still be incomplete. We would still lack wisdom. We would still lack God's presence and redemption. Mere continuance will not buy fulfillment. Worse, its pursuit already threatens human happiness by distracting us from the goals toward which our souls naturally point. By daily keeping death before our eyes, we stay focused on the horizon of our life. As the psalmist prays, teach us to number our days that we may gain wisdom of heart. It is the human horizon to our life that gives it meaning and that cultivates a wise heart, the only heart that can find happiness in this life and the next. Our technology, though, offers us days without number. This kind of life might be long, but it would not be good. It might give us information, but it would not make us wise. For the monastic tradition, death is the domain of the devil, and the devil needs to be defeated on his own turf. Jesus did not avoid death. He entered into it and transformed it. By his death, he trampled down death, and in his resurrection, he conquered it. We must follow him there. We must first die to ourselves in this life through asceticism. Dying to ourselves is preparation for bodily death at the end of life. By dying to ourselves and overcoming sin, we overcome the devil, and we overcome death. By daily keeping death before our eyes, we also fix our gaze on the borderland between this life and the next. We keep our sights set on the path we must take to achieve true eternal life, the same one that Jesus trod. Our tech gurus want to prolong this life. Their goals are imminent. They fear death and seek to avoid it at all costs, even at the cost of their and our humanity. They want to transcend the limits of bodily reality. But death reminds us that we are a body. Anton Barbecue observes, to die is to become a body that can be acknowledged only by being touched. And physical touch is the one sense we cannot reach online. To die is the opposite of being online. Perhaps this is one root of their fear. But we should not fear death so much as separation from God. Our tech gurus, though, may object at this point and say that since there is no God, there is no afterlife, and so nothing to fear except non-existence. So we should prolong this one. In his poem, The Discreet Charm of Nihilism, the great Polish poet Czesław Miłosz writes about the fools who say in their hearts that there is no God. He says, "Religion used to be the opium of the people. To those suffering humiliation, pain, illness, and serfdom, religion promised the reward of an afterlife. But now we are witnessing a transformation. A true opium of the people is the belief in nothingness after death, the huge solace, the huge comfort of thinking that for our betrayals, our greed, our cowardice, our murders, we are not going to be judged. Perhaps we are trying desperately to avoid death so we can avoid God's judgment." Conclusion, which is longer than you think, so stay comfortable. This talk has surveyed two approaches to understanding reality: AI technology and ascetic theology. One promises us super intelligence, super longevity, and super happiness in this world at the small price of our humanity. The other promises limitation, death, and suffering in this world in exchange for sharing God's divine life in the next. The world will always choose the first. What will we choose? We become what we love. If we love the machine, we will become the machine. But if we love God, we will become God. This won't happen through striving or technology. It will only come by accepting our limits and allowing God to make us into the creatures he made us to be. It will only come through taking up our cross and following Jesus. AI is coming whether we want it or not. Like so many recent technologies, it will be imposed upon us by powerful forces, and either we will try to take some stand against it, or we will be absorbed by it. I have proposed the ascetic path as the way to take our stand. But we might ask, do our little acts of self-denial even matter? Well, certainly they will matter to us, and they will matter to our friends and family near us. Certainly they will matter to God. Will they make a difference? God only knows. Benedict lived in a cave for 3 years until God revealed him to the world and used his way of life to bring light to the so-called Dark Ages. What he and his monks showed was that God was real and that a different way of life was possible. Similarly, today, the ascetic life lived for God can show that the machine is not ultimate reality. Beyond this world, beyond the digital world of our fantasies, there's another world, the real one, where all our longings find true fulfillment. Immanence is not the final word. There's a different structure to the cosmos. We did not make ourselves. A different way of life is indeed possible. Likely, not many will join those who live this life, but that has always been the case. Only a few find the small gate and the narrow road that leads to life. It has only ever been creative minorities who have changed the world, if the world was to be changed. In one part of his rule, Benedict says that at all times the life of a monk ought to be a Lenten observance. Asceticism reminds us that we are poor, banished children of Eve, mourning and weeping in this valley of tears. We should not pretend otherwise. But asceticism also reminds us that this is only temporary. Benedict's perpetual Lent is infused with the joy of the resurrection. We engage ascetic practices, he says, so that each may offer, above his appointed measure and of his own free will, something to God in the joy of the Holy Spirit, thus awaiting Holy Easter with the joy of spiritual desire. All of life, Benedict teaches, is a joyful anticipation of Easter, of the time when we will become one with the bridegroom. Through fasting and chastity and meditating on death, we prepare our hearts and bodies for union with him. We prepare ourselves for the time when he will wipe away every tear and will unite us so intimately with himself that we will be filled with all the fullness of God and shine like the sun in the kingdom of our Father. Thank you.